Hi all, welcome to a Grammar Quickie. This time we're going to look at the past simple. So, just like words, grammar has meaning. And when we talk about the past simple, we're talking about the past in its most simplest meaning. It talks about actions that are done, that are completed, that already happened. They are truly in the past. Let's take a look at a few examples. Jack played football yesterday afternoon. We know what he did. He played, and we know when, yesterday afternoon. Sarah lived in London for 3 years. So we know that she lived in the past, and that was for 3 years. The children listened to the story at school. Now here we know what they did. They listened, but we don't know exactly when. It happened sometime in the past. Mike liked swimming when he was a child. So we know what he liked. He liked swimming. And we know more or less the time period when he was a child. We understand that Mike isn't a child anymore. He's probably grown up. Mary told me a funny story. We know it happened in the past, but we don't know exactly when. But remember, we often talk in a context. So let's say I was talking to a friend of mine. He said, I saw Mary yesterday. She told me a funny story. So here we need to look at the whole context to understand exactly when the action happened. But from the sentence, we know that it happened sometime in the past. The doctors had a meeting a week ago. So we know that the actions happened in the past, and we can pay attention to certain words or phrases that help us know when. Words like yesterday, last week, ago, for an hour, in 2022, when he was young. When we see these, it helps us see when the past action happened. So let's look at a few examples. Sam called his friend in New York yesterday. So what do we know? It was done yesterday. The action is done, and it was done yesterday. Daniel went to the grocery store 2 hours ago. Again, here, we know that the action is done and when? 2 hours ago. We visited Paris in 2022 after the pandemic. So here we get even more information. It probably wasn't in the beginning of 2022, but probably later in the year. So it was done in 22. Jack saw the movie. Well, we have no idea. We're going to need a bigger context in order to understand when it happened. Jack went to the movies, rented a movie yesterday evening. That's when he saw the movie. Tamar spent time in New York with her family. Here, too, we don't know when it happened other than in the past. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it's just enough to know that the action happened in the past. So the form. The form in past simple has two options depending on the verb. We have regular verbs, and that's most of them in English, and we add an ed to the base form of the verb. So we've worked, started, played. But sometimes we have verbs that change form. They change completely. It's a different word. Go to went. Eat to ate. Sleep to slept. And unfortunately, we just have to learn them, to memorize them. There are no rules. So when we want to make a negative sentence, it works the same way, whether it's a regular verb or an irregular verb. They didn't work. They didn't go. For a question, it's the same. Did you work? Did you eat? There are lots of ways to practice the form and to learn the irregular verbs. So I suggest you go out there into the internet, and there are lots of exercises that you can find. So let's look at it at a passage. So we have to pay attention to the general context. We look for the verb or the verb phrase in the sentence. I suggest you underline it or highlight it, because when you look at all of the verbs together, you already see the pattern. You see that they repeat themselves. We see that the action happened in the past just from looking at the verbs. Traveled, were, visited, didn't know, climbed, took, had, was. So last summer, my family traveled to Paris. So already we know, when did these actions happen? Last summer. We were there for 5 days. We visited many interesting places. Did you know that the Eiffel Tower is 330 meters tall? I didn't know that. We climbed the tower. It took us 45 minutes to climb the 1,665 steps. Afterwards, we had lunch at a cafe. It was a wonderful vacation. So here we know what happened and what the family did last summer. So now it's up to you. Practice. Pay attention to the meaning of the sentence. It has a message. Is it telling you this action is completed? It's done. Check to see if you know when it was done. And then learn the form. And that's just practice.